Hello, class. First off, I'd like to apologize for my absence yesterday. I was sick, like I said in my email, so I do apologize for that. But I still owe you guys a lecture, so I'm going to pre-record one for you right here, right now. And as you can see on your screen right now, this is Module 6, and this week we're going to be talking about computer security and safety. This is a topic that is a bit less my forte than the previous ones, that we've talked about, and it's something I've had to do a bit more research on to prepare myself adequately for this lecture. But I hope that I can, give you guys a quality um, presentation here, something that you can use in your daily lives. So, when we talk about computer security and safety, we're really breaking this down into three main categories. The first and most obvious one, the one that we all think of, is information risks. And what that involves is programs and data trying to be stolen from you by some sort of attacker. There are various kinds of attackers, and we're going to discuss that in a few. But in general, this is the kind of risk that we talk about most often when we're thinking about computer security and safety. And as you might expect, that is also the focus of this week's presentation. There's also environmental risks, which we often don't think about and probably should think a bit more about, if I'm being totally honest. These are the result of toxic chemicals found in our electronic devices, that beg your pardon. These are the result of toxic chemicals in electronic devices that, once they are discarded, become exposed to the environment and can do some ecological harm. And finally, there are the health risks. And these are more about our physical and mental well being. Things like eye strain, muscle aches and pains, carpal tunnel syndrome, and mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. We're going to go a bit in depth on those in a little while, but again, the focus of this lecture is on information risks. So when we talk about information risks and attackers associated with these risks, we can generally break those attackers down into one of five categories. The first of those categories is the script kiddies. I've seen that written with two D's instead of two T's. Um, this may be an interchangeable statement sort of thing, but what they are, regardless, are amateur programmers and hackers who deface websites and conduct rudimentary attacks on websites and services. You might think of these as similar to vandals, people who might go around keying cars or tagging walls, or they might roll someone's house. Well, script kiddies are cyberspace equivalent to that. They do things on a similar scale. But as with vandals, in the real world and in the non-cyber world, I don't like to use the term real world because the cyber world is the real world. But I'm rambling now. I apologize. In the non-cyber world, these vandals are perfectly capable of doing significant damage, and in the same way, script kiddies are as well. Next, we have hacktivists, and these you may have heard of groups like Anonymous. These are um, these are individuals or groups who conduct attacks on websites, whether they be for governments or businesses. And the point of these attacks is to promote some sort of political agenda or some kind of social change. And in general, these people at least believe that they're doing something for the greater good, whether or not that may be the case. Um, Cyber terrorists, on the other hand, are sort of the other side of that particular coin. These are people who attack infrastructure, such as the power grid. They might attack major economic centers. And the point of this is to spread fear and intimidation for the purpose of some political gain. They might be acting as an isolated group, or they may be acting as a rival government. And on a similar note to that, we have nation state actors. These are organizations within a government that you could think of as a sort of cyber military, where instead of attacking an enemy or a rival state with guns and bombs, they would instead use cyber attacks to disrupt or gain information or some other form of seeking an advantage over a rival nation. And finally, we have insiders. Insiders are people who work within an organization that is attacked, and they are the ones who conducted said attack. And these people make up for a majority of cyber crimes committed against industry. In fact, it's quite a significant majority, and that is down to quite a number of factors that I don't want to get too in depth in on this lecture, just because this is more of a surface level skim of a very, very broad topic. But insiders may include disgruntled employees who are doing some form of retaliation. They may conduct a denial of service attack where they overwhelm the company servers and force them to shut down or otherwise interrupt their service. Or it could be somebody who is attempting to steal information from within the company in order to sell it for monetary gain. And that's not a complete breakdown of who an insider might be, but it should give you an idea of the kind of people who would conduct these attacks and how they might go about doing it. As far as our ways that we put our own information at risk, online banking and shopping, these are obvious ways that we put ourselves at risk. We talked about this in previous lectures. When you are conducting online business of some kind, whether you're buying products or checking your bank, this information is traveling across a network. And as it's in transit, it may be at risk depending on the network and the devices on each end of the information transaction. And we're going to get more into detail on that later, but for now, just know that this is not a statement to suggest that you shouldn't do online shopping, but rather we're going to talk about ways that you can protect yourself while you're doing them. One of those ways is to be aware of fake websites. There are nefarious persons and groups who will create fake copies of a web page in order to get you to give up your information. So, say you are shown some nice sale and some link directs you to a payment method or some other thing like that. This is not something I've encountered myself. This is just, I'm sort of spitballing a possible scenario. You enter your information thinking, oh, I'm buying this really cool new MP3 player or phone or some t-shirt or whatever. I can think of a number of examples, just insert item here. But once you click submit, instead of going to a verified payment processing service or to notify a company that it's good to ship the product to you through UPS or snail mail or whatever, instead it's gone to the attacker's own web server. And in doing that, you have given up your information to them, and then they can use that to harm you in some way. And so being aware of fake websites and not trusting every link that comes by your view is a quick and obvious step toward protecting your information. Social media sites are another source of online information risk. It's very easy for us to want to share things about ourselves. And not everybody, of course. Some people are more private than others. But for those of us who are more public, more transparent, it might be tempting to turn your social media into a sort of live stream where, you're updating every noteworthy thing that happens, or you might be posting your birth date or something like that, so that, you get all those nice happy birthday messages on your birthday. You really don't want to do these because that is the number one way that people put their information at risk through social media. And the last of these online risks is data mining. And what this is we take giant vats of information. That's the only analogy that I can think of at the moment. We just take these huge collections of information and we skim these data sets to find, consolidate, and analyze important, useful things. And businesses use this for targeted advertising and other such things like that. It's not necessarily an evil thing in and of itself. Some people are not fond of data mining as a practice, and that's completely understandable, but it is usable by businesses. It is very useful to businesses to conduct their operations more efficiently. However, it can be used for nefarious purposes. And there are ways that you can be sure of your own data, what's out there, and you can take a little bit more control over it. And we're going to discuss that really quickly here. Some ways that you can protect your information. Firstly, only give necessary information when completing an online form. You may have noticed that most online forms will say, here is this information. If you see a red asterisk beside it, that means that it is required. Excuse me one second. And if you see things where the red asterisk isn't there, or whatever else they use to indicate required fields, there is nothing stopping you from leaving that optional content blank. And that's not going to impact service in any significant way by and large. It is, at the end of the day, up to you to decide to give away that optional information, but for optimal security of your own data and to protect yourself as best as possible, it is recommended that you leave those optional fields blank. Reviewing the information that sites such as Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others have on you. You have the ability to request this data, and if you don't like what you see, you may stop using their service. I'm not sure what other means of recourse you have in the event that you are not happy with how much information they are taking related to you. I know Microsoft, when you install Windows 10, you have several options as far as data collection goes, and speaking personally, I turn all of those off, and I would recommend that you do the same. But you do have some degree of control over what information is gathered on you. You can request to be removed from mailing lists. From my experience, not every company is going to honor these requests, but the more reputable ones will, and there are measures you can take if you continue to be harassed by a company to cease that harassment. You can create another email account to use in the event that a vendor or some other website requires an address. I personally use my Gmail. My JSU email obviously is used for all the academic things, and if I were to get full-time employment here, then I would continue to use my a JSU email for all purposes related to JSU. I use a Yahoo email for my personal emails, like communicating with other people, and also major accounts that I really care about, like my LinkedIn. And then I have a Gmail account that serves as a sort of landfill for garbage that I don't care about. And finally, don't use your social media account login information to log into another site. This applies twofold. Number one, don't use these quick shortcut login through your Google or Facebook or Twitter. Don't use those, because if an attacker can get into one, that means they can get into the other, and you have put yourself at a greater risk. Also, you want to make sure that your login credentials are unique across every one of your accounts. And we're going to get into more about that later when we talk about making strong passwords. But that's going to be the focus of keeping your credentials unique. And very quickly, we're going to touch on the environmental risks. And we mentioned toxic chemicals that get into the environment when we throw away our old technology. And we call this e-waste. And we have practices for maintaining a more environmentally preferable uh, set of habits, as it were, and we call this um, Sustainable Electronics Management, or SEM. And in general, this breaks down into three main categories of best practices. First off is buying green. Check to make sure that the company you're buying from uses environmentally preferable practices when designing their electronic components or devices. This can include using recycled materials, metals and plastics, um, or using recycled components entirely and just refurbishing them. You can also donate your functional but unwanted devices to a nonprofit organization such as a school, church, charity, disaster relief effort, what have you. Anything you can think of that is accepting old phones or old computers to conduct their business and achieve their goals, you can donate that way and ensure that that device will continue through its full lifespan. And finally, we can recycle all of our old technology. There are verified recycling services that you can contact, and they will accept your old technology and they will put it through the proper steps to bring it back into the manufacturing process or whatever those components may be best suited for. And these are just things to keep in mind. You should at least consider, instead of throwing away your old phone because you decided to upgrade and now this old brick is taking up space, or you just got a new fancy computer, something with much better graphics cards. Say you do gaming on your PC and you are always upgrading. Instead of throwing away those old parts, you can donate them or recycle them. Or the fourth option is kind of obvious. You can always sell them to somebody else who might make use of them. Moving on to health risks, we can generally break this down into three categories. We have physical, behavioral, and social health. And when we talk about the physical health risks of using a computer, the main thing we're talking about is repetitive strain injury. This is characterized by aches and pains and other such discomforts and injuries related to the repetitive, uninterrupted use of our devices, including keyboards and phones. As you can see with this gentleman here on the right, he is kind of slouched over. He's got his neck kicked back and generally does not look very comfortable, but over time, that discomfort can turn into some serious medical issues. And an important step to mitigating this is to take breaks. You don't necessarily have to go off and do something else for 2 hours or whatever. Just get up every so often, stretch for a few minutes, go get a drink of water, interact with somebody, something to keep you from being sat motionless for the most part for hours at a stretch. Not only will this improve your physical health, it can also aid you in being more productive, as it gives your brain a chance to refresh. Moving on to the more behavioral aspects. Technology addiction is something that has become increasingly problematic over the years, especially in the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing so many things into an online or otherwise virtual setting. Technology addiction, we all experience it. Many of you have given away that you're addicted to your technology in your blogs by saying that you don't know what you would do without your phone, or you couldn't live without your phone or your laptop or whatever. And that is a pretty clear indication of technology addiction. I don't mean any of this to sound like I'm judging you, because I'm guilty of it as well. I will spend 12 to 14 hours a day sat in front of my computer. So I'm right there with you. I don't know what I would do. But we have to manage this and learn to step away at least for a little while. Because if we don't, we lead ourselves into a sedentary lifestyle, and this is a very dangerous place to be in. We may not think about it because, oh, all I'm doing is just lounging. I'm in my desk chair or I'm on my couch. I'm just relaxing. But the fact of the matter is that you're not giving your body the activity that it needs. And when you don't do that, sedentary lifestyles have been linked to increased rates of mortality for pretty much any cause you can think of. Cancer, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, depression and anxiety leading to suicide, lipid disorders. I know, speaking from my own experience, I had some mental health issues going through undergrad, and it took until I had a chance to really notice how bad it had gotten to really start doing things about it, getting more active, and seeking counseling to better myself. And so I can speak from experience when I say being sedentary is more detrimental than you could ever realize. So I urge you all to take some time away from your technology, whether it be your phone or your computer, and just get outside for a little while. 20, 30 minutes a day. Or pick up a hobby that doesn't require your phone. For me, it was cooking. Just do something. Because this also impacts your psychological development in social interactions, as you might expect. If your conversations are mostly limited to text or voice calls where you can't see a person's face, well, that impedes your ability to pick up on social cues, or it may hinder your ability to understand context or read a room. And these can have dramatic impacts on your ability to function at work, at school, at home, anywhere. So I very much encourage you all, just to sum up this slide, I know I've gone on for quite a while, but I encourage you very much to spend some time outside, get some sun and some vitamin D in your system, a little bit of exercise, pick up a non-technology related habit. Of course, I say all of this assuming you haven't already. If you have, good job. And finally, let's talk quickly about social health. This has a couple of risk factors that we're going to talk about, namely cyberbullying and cyberstalking. And what cyberbullying is, as you're probably all well aware of at this point, it is harassment and attacks on someone's reputation or social life or what have you, using technological devices, whether it be through email, phones, social media, gaming sites, or public forums, or anything else you can name. In general, these are seen as being much worse cases of bullying, much more damaging than general bullying. And I want to go through a couple of examples of why this is the case. So, first of all, cyberbullying is much harder to escape, especially for somebody who spends a lot of time on the internet. Someone who might enjoy online gaming or spending time on forums. And here comes some jerk who wants to make your life miserable and keep you away from the things that you enjoy. This is the kind of cyberbullying that we typically think of. Somebody who's just a general butt about whatever and just wants to make your life worse for whatever reason. Another case is that they may attack someone's reputation. And by this I mean they might spread lies or gossip in an attempt to harm their image, which may not sound too bad to somebody who has the attitude of, I don't care what other people think, but it's not necessarily targeted at you in that case. They're making an indirect move that might get you fired from your job or expelled from school. These things happen. And in a more extreme case, I haven't heard much of this happening in recent years, but for a while, swatting was a huge problem, where people would make bogus calls to the police saying there's a situation unfolding at so and so's house, and it leads to the SWAT team coming in, barging into their home, just to, and it creates a scene. It often targeted people doing live streams on websites like Twitch or YouTube. And in an ideal world, these SWAT team members would see that there's nothing going on, or they would take a slower approach as they see that the person isn't armed, and everything would end perfectly fine. Unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world, and things happen, things escalate out of control in some situations, and there's a lot of uncertainties, especially when you're working in law enforcement and you are effectively taught not to take chances. Um, in some cases, I've heard of family pets being shot. I've heard of a flash grenade going off in a baby's crib. Yes, the baby was in it. Thankfully, they weren't permanently injured in any way. And in one case in 2017, a man in California was shot and killed during a swatting attack. And this, I don't want to. I didn't want to get into this. It wastes tax dollars, but much more importantly, it harms people. It harms their families and the people they care about. It has lasting traumatic effects, not just on the people, but on the SWAT team members. And it's just a horrible thing for everyone involved. And this is an extreme but very real case of cyberbullying. So, yes, it is worse than general bullying. But moving on from that, we have cyber stalking, which also worse than normal stalking, because with with cyber stalking, it's effectively normal stalking, but now they have GPS, or they have access to your phone or other means, and they can track you from a much greater distance. It's a scary prospect to think that somebody might be using technology that you have come to rely on so much to harm you, but these are things that happen. And moving away from the more personal ways that people can harm to a bit broader and more dangerous in some ways, malicious software programs, often shortened to malware. There are a number of different kinds, and I encourage you to read very carefully in your text about what these software programs are and what they do. But the main ones that I want to focus on right now are Trojans, ransomware, and address spoofing. These are ones that you tend to hear about the most nowadays, at least from my experience. So what a Trojan is it is a program that is entered into your computer through some means. It could be a file that has been infected with this program and is sent to you via a seemingly harmless email. And what this does is it gives whoever sent that Trojan control over your computer, and they can do any number of things with it. They could steal your identity by finding your passwords if they've been saved on your computer. They can use it to purchase goods and use your credit card information to do so. They can use it to defame you by doing some sort of nefarious act on your computer, and now it looks like you've done it. Moving on to ransomware. This is it's relatively new compared to the others, but it is extremely dangerous. What this does is it blocks a user from the information on their device, whether it be through encryption or some other means. And instead of you having access to that information, you are instead presented with a set of instructions to send a ransom to a particular address or group or what have you. And I shouldn't have to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway, just in case. Do not trust a ransom for any reason, because once they have your money, there is nothing stopping them from making your information completely inaccessible. Like, they could throw away the encryption key or whatever. You can't trust that they're going to honor their end of the deal, so don't give in to it. There are ways that you can break ransomware, and we're going to get into a very simple but effective way that is easy enough to do for everyone. It can effectively neutralize the threat of ransomware. And lastly, address spoofing. We have seen this so much over the last few years. I would find it very hard to believe if somebody told me that they have not experienced address spoofing if they knew what it was. And what it is somebody masks an email or phone call using another person's phone number or email address. My first experience with address spoofing, my mom, her email address was compromised, and I get an urgent email saying that I need to send money to help her out. She was in the next room when I got this, so I knew that was bunk, but I still went to her and let her know, hey, you need to change your email password just to be safe because I got this crazy email. If you've ever gotten these calls about your car insurance or whatever, or your vehicle's extended warranty, I get those just about every day, despite the fact that I don't have a vehicle. And it comes from a random phone number. Sometimes it might even be a recognized phone number, like from one of your contacts. Though I think that may be a matter of chance, at least for now. But you get these, and it's just a robocall. Again, it goes without saying you should not trust either of these. If you didn't ask for an email or phone call, immediately do not trust it. Another way that attackers might want to get a hold of your information is through social engineering. And this is a much more insidious way of getting your info than simply using some kind of software program. What this is instead is a way to manipulate and trick a victim into giving up their information. And this may be done through phishing. This is a common one that we've pretty much all seen. We've all gotten these crazy emails saying, you need to reset your information on this website. You see, it's like, you need to reset your PayPal information, and it's from some Gmail account. I'm just going to say this now as a dead giveaway to help you guys out. Look at the email address that is sending these emails for, random job offers or urgent messages to reset information. If it's coming from someone from a service like Amazon or PayPal, but it's being sent through a Gmail account, or if all the names look really similar to you in the list of recipients, that's a pretty good giveaway that it is a phishing scam. And you definitely do not want to touch the attachments that came with that email. Otherwise, you could infect yourself with any one of these. There are also hoaxes and spam, other just general ways of getting your attention and creating a sense of urgency or enticing you into handing over your information, something that seems like it could help you or even be a nice thing to have, but you've just given away your credit card number to some nefarious individual who is now going to run your credit into the ground. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about all the ways that we can protect ourselves. And there's quite a long list. A lot of it is common sense stuff. A lot of it is repeated across several different threats. But we've already talked about how to prevent health risks and environmental risks. So this entire section is going to focus on information risks. So the first risk that you have to worry about is something going wrong with the power to your computer, and possibly even a power surge that can damage your computer. We've already talked about power or surge protectors and uninterruptible power supplies in previous lectures, so I'm not going to spend too much time on these. Just remember that these are a tool that you should be using. To prevent your devices from being stolen, we have a few very simple practices. Number one is to use a cable lock. And what these do is they secure your cables in place so that someone can't just come and yank it and walk off with your laptop. And it can also help prevent your desktop from accidentally being unplugged and all of your information being lost, because now your computer is in shutdown and all of that volatile memory is gone. So using a cable lock is a one step. Another is keeping devices out of sight when you're in a high-risk area. Say you're driving around, you stop at Walmart, and you're going to go in, you're going to leave your laptop behind. You may be tempted to leave it in its case on the front passenger seat or even in the back seat, and you really should not do that. Move your laptop down into the floorboard, maybe even cover it with a pillow or something like that, just to conceal it from sight as best as you can. Avoid being distracted. This is common sense for just anything. If you're in public in general, please remain aware of your surroundings. If you are distracted or otherwise not paying attention to what's around you, attackers will notice, and they will use that to their advantage. Hold devices with both hands. Keep a firm grip so someone can't just come by and swipe it. I needn't say more. Don't use devices near escalators or train doors or anything where if you drop it, that device can be swept away out of your reach, because then before you can recover it, somebody else might. Don't use white or red headphone cords. I honestly didn't think about this one until I started reviewing these slides to present to you guys. So now it's kind of obvious you want to avoid bright, obvious colors when you're out in public for, things that might be enticing to thieves. So when you're out in public, you might want to use a darker colored black, blue, purple, something like that, so that it doesn't quite stand out as much. Don't give chase if your device is stolen. I know it's tempting. My first instinct would definitely be to chase someone down and tackle them if they tried to steal my phone or if they were running off with my phone. But these devices are expensive. We all know this. But they're not worth your life. You go to chase down somebody, tackle them to the ground. They're liable to pull a knife or a gun on you, and you may not be ready for that. It isn't worth any sort of loss of life for you to go chasing after your device. So just don't go running after a thief like a vigilante. Protect yourself more than you protect your technology. You should be protecting your technology exceptionally well, but even more so for your own person. That phone can be replaced. You can't. And finally, enable device security features. This is things like passwords, PIN numbers, patterns to enter with, drawing patterns on your phone, or other ones that we're going to get into later, some more advanced features of phones and tablets nowadays. But these are just some general ways to prevent your information or your device from being stolen. Backups. We talked about backups once or twice in other lectures, but quickly touch on these again. This is a way that you can really reduce the effect of ransomware. So if you've been keeping regular backups of your information, the important things, and you get hit with ransomware, you trusted something that you shouldn't have, you made an honest mistake, and now you've got this crap on your computer. Well, you've been making backups, so you can just wipe that hard drive completely clean, or even get rid of that hard drive, destroy it, and give it away to a recycling plant, and replace that drive, install all your stuff, and you're back to normal. Lesson learned, hopefully. So, this is just another way of reiterating back up your stuff. It will save you so much hassle in the event that something goes wrong. When we are surfing the web and we are on some wireless network, there are risks associated with this as well. Information can be viewed as it is in transit, and it can be altered by nefarious attackers, as opposed to the benign attackers. You know what I'm saying. I apologize. And there are a few precautions that we can take so that we don't fall victim to these kinds of attacks ourselves. Firstly, is only connect to an approved network when you're out in public. If your device is set to automatically connect to wireless networks, do yourself a favor and turn that off. I'll tell you why. One very simple reason. We call them evil twins. A malicious network is created to appear as one of the approved networks that you have access to. Say you're at a coffee shop and you see Starbucks network, and then you see another one, Starbucks network. They're the same. One of these is what we call an evil twin, and that is just a way to take your information, because that copy of the network, I'm not sure another way to put it, that identical clone, or whatever you want to say to describe it, that is just being used to monitor information for anybody who inadvertently connects to it. And now, again, they have your personal data. Limit the types of activities you do on public networks. If you are doing your online shopping at coffee shops or other public places like that, stop. Because even those approved networks can be attacked. They can be monitored by nefarious people. And that is just another way that your identity can be stolen. Limit it to, more casual things. Just web browsing, looking up information, or watching videos, things like that. Things that can't possibly identify you. And when you're at home, configure your router to be more secure. You have a lot of options with that. You can set up firewalls, you have password protection, and you always have the option of monitoring who is connected to your home network. And using these features, you can prevent yourself from being harmed, having your information stolen while you're in your home. Some more common general practices to protect your information, your privacy. These apply outside of technology, I feel. These are things that you can benefit from. Shredding documents. You can scan old documents that you need to keep as PDFs and store them in a password-protected way. Don't carry a social security number in your wallet or write it on a check. This is something that I have been guilty of before, but you generally don't want your social security number to be in a place where somebody could easily steal it. I think that should go without saying, because your social security number is... You use that to identify so many things. You had to give it to JSU to apply here as a student. You have to provide a social security number when you apply for financial aid or creating a bank account. It's used to uniquely identify you. And so you absolutely do not want that falling into the wrong hands. And there's a bunch of other things here that are kind of obvious. Don't provide personal information through unsecured means. Don't just, send your social security number through the plain text of an email. If you need to send that information for whatever reason, you should most likely never need to send your social security number through an email. This is just an example, but do so in a protected file of some kind or in some other protected manner. And the last one that I want to touch on is be cautious with websites asking about your information. If it's more than you think they should have, if it's more than you think they need in order for business to operate as expected, leave the website. Don't give them your business. If they're asking you for really personal things to create an email account, you don't need to be using them for your email. Strong passwords. This is something that cybersecurity experts feel the need to harp on a lot because no matter what is said or done to encourage use of better passwords, there are people out there who still have their password for really sensitive things as password. And to even to somebody like me who I'm not entirely focused on cybersecurity, I think about it enough to protect myself and those around me, but it's not a focus of my studies or my career. But stuff like that does still infuriate me because there are very simple ways that you can make strong passwords, and you can see the steps here. But later on, sometime by the end of this week, my goal is to create a worksheet for you guys. This will not be graded, don't worry. It's completely optional, but it will help you to create strong passwords and protect your information. So for the time being, I'm not going to talk too much about this slide and the specificities of it. I just want you all to know that if you're using weak passwords that break some of these rules that you see here, you definitely need to change them. And you'll see why in a bit more detail in the worksheet that I hand out later on in the week, possibly next week, depending on what my own personal schedule looks like. One other topic I'd like to discuss is biometric security measures. And as you might expect, these are just using unique qualities of your body, your DNA, to identify you. And this can include fingerprints, retina scans, iris scans, facial recognition. We've touched on some of these a bit in previous lectures, but not from a security standpoint. And these measures are becoming increasingly available on personal devices like phones and tablets, and it is recommended that you give those a try and see if they're not too much of a hassle for you. In general, they are better than just a simple PIN number. Not so much voice recognition because it's easier to mimic a voice than the other four, but fingerprints and facial recognition and retina scans definitely. Another factor of security that a lot of people find aggravating but is no less helpful is two-factor authentication. There's also multi-factor authentication, or MFA as opposed to 2FA, but they're both the same principle. Some other login credential is sent randomly generated to maybe another device. It could be a code to access your student finances. I'm sure you've all used Duo at least once at this point. And that is an example of two-factor authentication. There's also the CAPTCHAs, which make you identify certain images. And these aren't sent to another device, but they do verify that you are a real person and not a computer program. Um, but in addition to that, you've also got, um, I'm struggling to think. I apologize. Sending codes to email addresses. This is common practice when creating an account. But these are all just different forms of two-factor authentication, and these are things that you generally do not want to pass up. They're not that time consuming. They don't take that much more time to log in when you have them enabled, and you really should enable them to protect yourself. I don't want to spend too much time talking about encryption. This is something that's very hard to get really technical with. Just know that encryption as a practice is thousands of years old, and with the advent of computers, the practice really grew in some neat ways. Back in the old days before technology that we're familiar with was even conceivable, we had things like the Caesar cipher, where a message was shifted by a certain number of letters. And in order to crack the message, you had to know how many letters over it was shifted. Nowadays, encryption techniques use far, far more complicated mathematical calculations that a single individual person trying to work out the math on their own, it's not possible. Not in any sort of time frame that would be helpful. So encryption, I encourage you to read about it in your book. It's a very neat topic of discussion, but I don't want to get too far into it because it is very technical, very math heavy, and I don't want this lecture to drag out too long. And the last thing that I want to talk about is identity theft. We all know what this is. We've seen the ads for things like LifeLock and other services that talk about it. It is pretty much what we've been discussing for this entire lecture. Someone gets a hold of your personal information, uses it to masquerade as you, and they might buy some expensive thing, buy a house, buy a car, whatever, and leave you with the bill. And as far as anybody can tell, it was you that made this purchase. And this can damage your credit. It can leave you with bills that you are not able to pay, or legal disputes that can drag out for extended periods of time. And so it is exceptionally important that you protect yourself in all the ways that we've talked about in this lecture today to prevent your identity from being stolen. And ways that you can do this, ways that you can monitor your own information, very similar to the last set of steps to protect yourself, but with one notable addition. You have ways to monitor your finances, not just your bank balance, but also your credit reports. You can request once per year a credit report that includes all of the three major reporting firms. If you bank with someone like Regions and you have an online account, you can look at your FICO score a bit more often than that, but that's not a complete report. And it's more just you looking at your score. With your annual report, you can view everything down to every credit that was made in your name, every loan that was taken out, paid off, etc. And if something has gone wrong, then you can work to redress the issue. And so the gist of this lecture has been know the tools you have at your disposal to protect yourself. This is an imperfect world with imperfect people, and some of them may target you for some nefarious purpose. And so knowing how you can protect yourself is not going to be a perfect means of reducing your risk of attack. It's always possible, and it's something you need to remain vigilant about. But you can greatly mitigate these risks by taking the necessary steps. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, reach out. Remember that you have the same set of assignments due this week, the same kind of assignments. You have the tech module exam for this chapter. This is module 6. You also have your SAM exam, your SAM project. This is Excel week 2. And also your blog. Do not forget to turn all these in. Some of you are struggling, some of you are doing really well. I'd like to see more of you doing really well. But outside of all that, thank you for listening. I apologize that some of this got rambly, but I wanted to make sure that I covered everything as best as possible. Be on the lookout for the worksheet on how to make strong passwords, and I will see you guys at the next lecture.